Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating framework drawn directly from our source text, knowing the truth about this world and the afterlife. We're going to explore the entire chronological journey of the soul, from the actual purpose of our physical existence right up to how our ultimate destination is determined. So, let's jump right in.
We have to start with a highly practical question that the text immediately addresses. It's the ultimate skeptic's question, right? If spirits, deities, and the afterlife actually exist, why are they totally hidden from our everyday waking view? Why isn't the spiritual world just, obvious to everyone? Well, the source text doesn't shy away from this at all. In fact, it argues that this invisibility is absolutely crucial for our development.
The text defines Earth in a very specific way. It calls it a spiritual training ground. The core idea here is that if the spirit world were constantly visible, constantly intervening in our daily lives, it would completely ruin our independent development. Think about it. If you always had the answers to a test floating right in front of you, you wouldn't actually learn a thing, would you? The invisibility is what ensures authentic soul growth.
There's a really striking analogy used here. It compares direct spiritual interference to poking a turtle with a stick. Just as a turtle retreats into its shell to hide when it gets poked, the text argues that if humans were constantly corrected by visible spiritual beings, we'd actually shrink away from personal responsibility. We just become dependent, instead of growing independently into mature souls. So that's separation. It's entirely by design.
Section 1. The transition and losing our earthly desires. Moving past this earthly training ground, what exactly happens to the soul the second after physical death?
Right away, there is a stark contrast between our physical and spiritual realities. The text highlights what it calls the three major desires that pretty much rule our physical lives: appetite, sleep, and sex. Obviously, you can't just decide never to sleep or eat again without major biological consequences. But according to the source, once the soul leaves the body, the spiritual body is completely freed from all of that. The soul survives without needing 3 square meals a day or 8 hours of sleep. It's an instant liberation from earthly biology.
Section 2. The bewildered souls and the trap of materialism. As the source outlines, this transition is definitely not smooth for everyone. In fact, it can be deeply traumatic for those who fall into the trap of pure materialism.
Imagine the profound confusion here. Souls who lived purely materialistic lives and staunchly denied any kind of afterlife are thrown into absolute chaos. Because they don't have biological needs anymore, but they still feel completely conscious, they try to rationalize what's happening using earthly logic. They start wondering, wait, am I dreaming right now? Is this a hallucination? Or am I on some kind of hidden camera show?
The text points out that individuals who firmly, stubbornly rejected the afterlife, maybe calling all religions fake or dismissing spiritual concepts entirely, they simply lack the framework to process their new reality. They literally cannot comprehend that they are dead because they refuse to believe this state of existence was even possible in the first place.
And honestly, this brings us to an incredibly tragic reality. The deceased person might actually attend their own funeral. They see their family grieving, and they try to speak to them, yelling, "Hey, I'm right here." But your voice just does not reach the people of this world. The text emphasizes how utterly baffling and sad it is for these souls, shouting at their loved ones, completely unable to comprehend the sudden, invisible barrier that now separates the two worlds.
Section 3. The Life Drama Review, a cinematic reflection. Once the soul finally realizes and accepts that it is passed on, it moves to a highly structured, objective review of its earthly existence.
Here is the timeline of how this unfolds. Your life isn't just viewed as a random series of events, it's an accumulation. From your arrival on Earth at birth through all your specific life choices, right up to the separation from your physical body at death. And then comes the final step. The screening. This is a sequential, mandatory review process where your entire chronological life journey is played back. This review is quite literally compared to a movie screen. Your life is projected before you in what feels like a highly condensed, intense film. It's often described as feeling like roughly 2 hours in earthly time, though obviously in spiritual time it passes in a flash. You sit there and watch the life drama of your own existence, from beginning to end. Now pay really close attention to this specific detail. You do not get to watch this movie from your own personal, defensive perspective. The text emphasizes that this is a director's cut. It is an objective, edited digest viewed strictly through the eyes of your guardian spirit. This means no rose-colored glasses, you can't make excuses, you have to see your actions and the ripples of those actions with absolute, unbiased clarity.
Section 4. The Final Destination. Dividing Heaven and Hell. Following this intense screening, a judgment is made, and it's determined by a very specific, emotion-based sorting mechanism.
The source maps out its core thesis perfectly right here. Your ultimate destination is dictated by your habitual emotional state. If your earthly life was defined by positive emotions, joy, happiness, pleasure, gratitude, you naturally align with heaven. On the flip side, if your life was anchored in negative emotions, anger, deep sorrow, resentment, grudges, those heavy emotional anchors naturally pull your soul downward toward hell. It's an automatic sorting process, based entirely on the emotional frequency you cultivated while you were alive.
As the source text emphatically states, if your mind produces a constant stream of negative thoughts, grudges, and anger, you are literally constructing a hellish spiritual trajectory. The text explains that living an earthly life clouded by those dark emotions creates a reality that the soul simply cannot escape upon death. You naturally gravitate to the realm that perfectly matches your inner state.
And this emotional rule is so foundational that it isn't just for humans. The text notes that this applies to animals too. A beloved pet that dies loved, happy, and safe will gravitate toward a heaven-like Rome. But an animal that dies violently, filled with fear or anger, will experience a basic hellish state. It is presented as a universal law of emotional gravity.
So let's step back and look at the entire chronological framework we've covered today. These are the core takeaways from the text. Earth is an intentionally shielded training ground to force us to grow. Death frees us from the biology of eating and sleeping. If we are purely materialistic, we just trap ourselves in profound post-death confusion. Ultimately, every single one of us must sit through the objective, cinematic review of our life drama. And finally, the universe sorts us based on the habitual earthly emotions we chose to live with every single day.
It's a highly structured, unyielding view of the universe, where our inner emotional lives carry incredible eternal weight. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought, based strictly on the criteria we explored today. If the life you live today, with all its passing thoughts and dominant emotions, was suddenly played back on that objective review screen, where exactly would your emotions lead you?